On this episode, we're going to review a new bottle and put it on the hot seat. Hey, welcome back to Barrels and Bark. I'm Zach. Thank you so much for tuning in. We are glad that you are with us on this episode. If you like what we're doing, follow, subscribe, and comment. We much appreciate it. So today, we're going to focus on a bottle. We're going to look at it, break it down, put it on the hot seat. Today's bottle is Nelson Brothers Whiskey Reserve Bourbon. This bottle, now to give you a little bit of context of what this bottle is and where it's from. Charles Nelson was the founder of a Tennessee largest Prohibition distillery, responsible really for producing Nelson's Green Brier Tennessee whiskey. The brand has a U.S. trademark dating back to 1860. Like I said, it's one of the oldest distilleries pre-Prohibition. Now, the great-great-great-grandsons, Andy and Charles, they decided to relaunch the business in 2022 this year. The brothers decided to launch a new line of whiskeys called Nelson Brothers. These bottles are actually replacing the Belle Meade and the Belle Meade Reserve, which have been available nationwide for years and now will only be available in Tennessee. Let's take a look at this glass here. This is not super dark. It's a decent color. Probably has a little bit darker than an apple juice, or maybe like an apple cider color, amber-ish. It looks fairly thin. There's not a lot of legs, but there are some. Let's go in for a smell here. Right off the bat, I get a lot of almost like that cinnamon spice applesauce, if that makes sense, with some brown sugar, a little bit of vanilla. You get a little bit of that oak kind of on the back end, that rye spice. You could definitely smell that. But I get a lot of applesauce, cinnamon applesauce with brown sugar in it. If you've ever made and warmed up applesauce, kind of that cinnamon applesauce with brown sugar, that's really what you get on the first smell here. Again, I opened this bottle a week ago, kind of poured it down to the neck there just to get a little bit of oxygen in there and air, and then poured this about 35-40 minutes ago, let it sit out here. So this has had a little bit of time to breathe. Definitely get more, it opens up here, more of that oaky wood. Again, vanilla, apple, decent smell here. Let's go for a sip. Now, fairly thin. I will say that. It's not real thick. It's fairly thin and light when they first tasted, but a lot of sweetness up front. A lot of sweetness. You get a little bit more of that applesauce, a lot more of that spice. That rye spice really comes in. That rye and oat really comes in on the back end. Definitely get some more caramel. Some caramel. Get a lot of that apple cider, applesauce, cinnamon, spice, rye. Definitely has that bite, that back end bite here. Let's go in for a little bit of the finish here and focus on the finish. Yeah, definitely a lot of the oak, a lot of that char, that rye spice on the back end. It's not as sweet. Definitely has a little bit of burn. I know it's 107 proof, so definitely packs a little bit of a punch here, but you definitely feel it. It definitely is warm, kind of on that back end. It cools down a little bit. The finish isn't super long. It's fairly, kind of drops off pretty quick, but it definitely has that rye, allspice, baking spice, wood, oak, kind of roll off in the back that you can kind of get here. Let's try again. A lot more caramel butterscotch now up that front, that real overly sweet front. Again, it's fairly light. I like a little bit more viscosity and a little thicker, but it's a little light, but it has a lot of sweetness. A lot of that caramel, apple, a little bit of butterscotch. The mid palate definitely has a mix of that rye, some apple. I get applesauce in there. And that finish definitely kicks a lot more of that rye. There's a little bit on the finish here that I'm getting more of that kind of peanutty nuttiness in it, which makes sense. It is probably has a little bit of Tennessee influence in there, Tennessee whiskey. Definitely says it's blended. A little bit of that nut in there, definitely on that back end. I get a lot more on the finish. Even just talking here, it kind of is coming through here. So it's not a bad sipper here. It could be a little thicker. It's a little bit thin for me. The front palate is not super strong. There's not a lot of flavor. It doesn't really pack a ton of depth to it. Let's go in for another little sip. It definitely gets sweeter. The more it kind of sits here and opens up, a lot more of that caramel, butterscotch, applesauce, cinnamon, rye is kind of the dominant flavor in it. It starts off really sweet, rolls into that kind of apple tart, and then it really hits that spice, and then you get that nut, that peanut on the back end. It really is, probably the only thing I can think of now is just that peanut back end there. Overall, I say it's a decent whiskey. I think what they're doing is good. I haven't tried the classic version of this. It'd be interesting to try the two together. I definitely think the bottle shape is cool. Obviously very similar to their line of bottles with Belle Meade. I think the label has a cool look to it. It definitely has kind of a throwback bottle look, kind of a throwback vintage look. Overall, I would say this. I would give it an average sipper. I do think that the $60 price tag on it is a little bit high for what you get. Unfortunately, that $60 range, there are some really good hitters in there. It's probably not one that's going to stand out too much or be one that really gives you anything different. And so, depending on your flavor profile and what you like, I definitely would recommend trying it. I think it's a decent bottle to have on your shelf and to try. But unfortunately, there just isn't enough there to really make it stand out. It's a decent bottle. I wish it would be more in that 45 range. I think at that range I would be more willing to probably give it more of a shot and drink it more regularly. But with that $60 mark, just isn't quite hitting the flavors that I like. Hey, thank you so much for joining us for this hot seat review. Stay tuned for more reviews in the future. We'd love for you to like, comment, subscribe, and follow us. And stay tuned, and we'll see you again.